Okay, we'll start with this. A more extensive look at most valuable promotions is recent signing of former undisputed champion Savannah Marshall, who has joined their robust stable of Valkyries. Now that MVP is in the Savannah Marshall business, I definitely expect to see a fight between her and Greene. I already thought that fight was going to happen before this news broke, before this news was announced, more so now. But a Greene fight is not really the end game or the bottom line here for Savannah Marshall. No, Greene services as a pit stop, if you will, for something bigger. It's not to sound disrespectful, but I've seen Greene's last couple of fights, and she just hasn't looked impressive. She hasn't looked up to scratch. The biggest thing working for her is that it's been over a year's time since Savannah had a fight, and that's assuming that Savannah turns out to be her next fight. Perhaps not. Perhaps MVP gets Savannah a tune-up fight first, then a Greene fight. That's another way it might happen. And that would make more sense because Savannah's been out a while, sporting a professional record of 13 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 10 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 14 professional bouts, last in action over a year ago. And what was the Franchon Cruz fight in July of 2023, where Savannah won a majority decision to become the super middleweight division's undisputed champion. Now everyone is expecting an official announcement for what could be a Greene fight, but as it stands, no such fight is registered on BoxRec. So perhaps MVP might elect to get Savannah a tune-up fight first, then go into the Greene fight. It's a little different now because they're invested in Savannah, which is not the same thing as borrowing her from another promoter to make a big fight. So if I'm MVP, I get Savannah that tune-up fight, then I have her fight Greene, then I push for a Shields rematch. That's the game changer here. The reason the rematch between them didn't happen is because after the first fight, Clarissa was insistent that a rematch must happen in America or no fight, which I always thought was strange because Clarissa knows her promoter, Dimitri Salita, does not have the same resources as Sky Sports and Boxer, so when you say you want it in America, who are you expecting to pay for it? Dimitri can't, he doesn't have the money, and Sky Sports and Boxer won't because they're based out of the UK. But now that Savannah is with MVP, that has partnerships with both Netflix and DAZN, the fight is viable in America because they can pay for it. And Clarissa Shields' beef with Jake Paul? The next obstacle, the next hindrance, that Clarissa Shields has taken it upon herself to make an enemy out of Jake Paul. That is, she's taken it upon herself to be his enemy since MVP has tried to work with her. She's gonna let that get in the way of making a bunch of money? Well, she already has. She was offered a slot on the undercard of Taylor vs. Serrano 3 to face Greene, and she turned it down to go fight Lonnie Daniels in what is a comparatively smaller show, much smaller show, for likely much smaller money. So even though MVP can pay for the fight to happen right here in the United States, you have to wonder if Clarissa will continue to stand on that square apart from MVP and what they're trying to do, because all they're trying to do is advance women's boxing and put together the biggest fights possible on the biggest stages, but she's so stubborn and stupid, you never really know. Still, MVP coming into the frame makes the fight somewhat more viable, because before there was nobody in America to pay for it, whereas now they can. Clarissa just has to play ball. She also has to move down. She'd also have to move down from heavyweight, where she's currently campaigning, back down to super middle, which could take some time. So while she's doing that, Savannah can have a tune-up, then fight Jadeja. Conversely, Savannah can move up. Savannah can move up to heavyweight, where Clarissa is right now, and fight her there. That's another way to do it. And it would be for undisputed, since Clarissa is undisputed champion in the Baron heavyweight division. For Savannah Marshall and for Clarissa Shields, that still is the biggest fight anywhere at or around these weights for the biggest money.
Manny Pacquiao, who fought Chris Algieri in the year 2014, is returning to the ring to fight Mario Barrios for the WBC welterweight title.
The fact that he skips the line, that's my issue. You got unifications you can make. This weight class is wide open.
So you look at the rankings. Devin Haney, number 1, is crazy because he's never actually fought at 147. The last fight was at 144. And you bring up Shishko, who no one really doesn't have a huge profile. Conor Benn, who also...
Devin also has not fought a welterweight yet, because he fought Ramirez, who's coming up from 40 to 44. Never fought a welterweight.
You peel that onion back and you actually look at the WBC welterweight rankings. It's a mismatch of guys that are...
Perfect storm for Manny's return.
Though not without some criticism, that WBC president Mauricio Suleiman is now attempting to justify on the eve of Manny Pacquiao's comeback. WBC president Mauricio Suleiman has responded to the backlash aimed at Manny Pacquiao's return against Mario Barrios. Wishing to defend his decision to sanction the controversial welterweight matchup, it is widely reported that the pair will lock horns for Barrios' WBC world title on July 19th, headlining a PBC pay-per-view on Amazon Prime. Along with that, a far more sensible undercard rematch between WBC World Super Welterweight Champion Sebastian Fundora and Tim Tszyu is also expected to take place, but of course, the return of the 8-weight world champion Manny Pacquiao is what has ultimately dominated the headlines, while also proving to be a highly contentious point of discussion. The 46-year-old has not fought professionally since his unanimous decision defeat to Yordenis Ugas, which followed points victories over Adrian Bronor and Keith Thurman back in 2021. Though in between the Thurman fight and the Ugas fight, there were 2 years of inactivity there, and here and now, there are 3 years of inactivity in between the Ugas loss and the Barrios fight. Pacquiao is largely focused on his political campaign, no doubt hemorrhaging vast sums of money in his bid to become a Filipino senator. Last year, however, Pac-Man entered an exhibition bout against Japanese kickboxer Rikuya Enpo and, rather surprisingly, was made to look every bit of his age. But regardless of that, Suleiman has decided to sanction Pacquiao's comeback against Barrios. The same Mauricio Suleiman that initially didn't want to sanction Beterbiev versus Bivol due to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, as if that has anything to do with either Artur Beterbiev or Dmitry Bivol. He eventually came around. Turkey El Al-Sheikh's money had a lot to do with that, I think, and it's the same here now. Money is the motivator. That's the motivation. When the decision was challenged by British trainer Dave Caldwell, the WBC boss offered his response. He wrote on X yesterday, "Remember Sugar Ray Leonard? My father, Jose Suleiman, and the WBC were criticized for making his fight versus Marvin Hagler." Though it is worth noting that Sugar Ray Leonard, despite returning from a 3-year layoff, was in his early 30s by the time he and Hagler fought. Unlike Pacquiao, who is 46, he's closer to 50 than he is to 40. And while Leonard was moving up 2 divisions to middleweight, the safety concerns surrounding Pacquiao's comeback given his age remain plausible. Manny Pacquiao has been licensed by the Nevada State Athletic Commission and has passed all medicals, and as legendary WBC champion has been approved to fight by our organization, Let's Talk on July 20th. Which is just a fanciful way of saying the ends might justify the means, that if Manny wins on July 19th, it would turn out he wasn't too old to fight after all. If he wins. But if he loses, if he goes out there and looks even worse than he looked with Rikuya and Po last year, the World Boxing Council will be subject to even more criticism, and everyone associated with this event, the PBC included, dusting off a very old, inactive Manny Pacquiao because their stable has become thinner and thinner over time. It's not just the safety concerns, it's also alienating the other ranked contenders that have been fighting the last 3 years. One in particular that was in action this weekend, Souleymane Sissoko, who has nowhere near the profile of a Manny Pacquiao, but he has been fighting in the necessary eliminators and paying you sanctioning fees so that you can turn around and let Manny skip ahead of him. Then what's the point in fighting in all those eliminators? And what's the point in becoming a mandatory if you're just going to give the shot to somebody else? Is it practical for Manny Pacquiao to get a shot at the WBC title before Souleymane Sissoko? Now, I'm an old cynic, and I always tend to glance over at the dark side before I look at the bright one. That if you're the PBC, you make more money if Manny's got the belt than if Mario's got the belt. Mario, God bless him, can't sell out a wing dinner. So just imagine that the Mario Barrios fight is really just a tune-up fight with a world title attached, because Mario Barrios is the low-hanging fruit at 147, and everybody knows that. He is the most beatable champion. That's why Manny's been looking at him for so long. You never heard about Manny looking at Brian Norman. You never heard about Manny looking at Jaron Ennis. It's always been Manny versus Mario Barrios.
Forgive that I am an old cynic, but the world made me this way.
It did.
And if Manny Pacquiao can make this fight competitive enough, I am of the opinion he will receive consideration.
Pacquiao versus Romero sells better than Barrios versus Romero. To kickstart what remains of Manny Pacquiao's career in the twilight years of it, a win over Barrios, they figure, gives him momentum to go into an even bigger fight, say a Rolly Romero fight or a Gervonta Davis fight. They need fights that they can sell, and there are not that many of them that they can make in-house without involving other fighters that are with other promoters. You get Manny a belt, you get 1 or 2 fights out of that guy. 1 or 2 extra. So because I'm an old cynic, I don't dismiss Manny Pacquiao's chances in this fight in spite of his age, if for no other reason than boxing is a business and backdoor deals happen all the time. When Rolly Romero got the WBA title at 140, what did I tell you? By hook or by crook, they're gonna make sure he gets that belt. And you saw what they did to Barroso. Wasn't even supposed to be him at first, it was supposed to be Puello. Then out of the clear blue sky, Puello pops hot, Barroso stands in. Likely because they knew Rolly didn't stand a chance against Puello. Get him an older guy. And even with the old guy, it was too much. They had to stop the fight prematurely based on punches that Rolly didn't even land to ensure that he got that WBA title. So here, it's not outside the realm of possibility that they do the same thing for Manny, because they need fighters and fights they can sell. And Mario ain't it.
What did you think of your son's performance against Jose Ramirez? If you could...
I loved it.
You loved it? Why?
I loved it because we shut down the critics and to say that if we don't want to get hit with a hook, you're going to take it home with you. It's going to stay in the trunk. If we don't want to get hit with a right hand, we're not going to do... That's boxing. That's the way boxing is going. That's the old school. You handicap a fighter. And you got to see at 26 another dimension in Devin's game. And I'll tell you one thing, Ariel, they're even more intimidated. Yeah, you'll call him boring, but you don't call him easy. You say a lot of shit about him, but you don't call him a loser. That's what you didn't call him.
Calling him boring is almost worse than calling him a loser, because people might tune in for a loser, a good loser, that puts forward a spirited performance, whereas a boring winner... Look at Demetrius Andrade. For a good number of years, he was an unbeaten fighter, but nobody cared. More people would rather see a Derek Chisora and his losses in the double digits than watch an Andrade. Than watch a Haney. I think more people would rather watch a Ramon Cardenas. See, this is just blissful ignorance. This is just cognitive dissonance from Bill, because how could you look at that performance and say that Devin Haney silenced any critics with it when people were critical of him?
Right after that, even the guy you hired to train him, even Shane Mosley.
We talked about it just the other day. How Shane disassociated himself from the whole thing, saying Devin must have adopted Bill's mindset, because that's not what he trained him to do. That's not what they worked on.
So, Bill, what critics did you silence? If anything, you've incurred the wrath of even more critics with that overly safe performance.
Is that still alive? Did the result in the main event affect that at all?
It didn't affect us. It didn't affect
the
way
promoters.
No, it didn't affect the way that we look at him.
That wasn't the question, Bill. The question wasn't how do you look at Ryan or how do you look at the rematch. The question was, are the people that were going to put it on, are they still going to put it on?
Sure.
I'm sure, Devin.
I still want to see the fight. I think the fight is still like its own story.
Right.
It would be nicer if Ryan was coming off a win, but I still want to see the fight just as much as any other fight out there right now. I was just wondering if you had any sense of whether Turkey and the promoters still want to put on the fight. Do they feel like it's been devalued because Ryan lost?
You know what? I agreed to the fight.
Same shit. You're not answering the question, Bill. They didn't ask you if you agreed to it. They asked you if Turkey and the powers that be still want to do it, because you stunk out the joint and Ryan lost.
So I can't back out of it. You know what I mean? I think they've already done promotion for the fight leading up to it. That's Rolly Romero went on record for saying, you guys are already promoting. So Devin has spent time in promoting that fight. We've spent time in negotiating that fight for all intent purposes. We believe that that's the next fight.
Okay, and that would be October, like mid-October or so?
Yes.
In Riyadh?
Mid-October in Riyadh.
You like that? Do you prefer it being there as opposed to in America, or would you rather it?
It's a dream of us, as a family, as a team, to fight over there. You know what I mean? Of course, we fought in Australia a couple of times, and we know that one of the places that's on our bucket list, our true bucket list, is the fight in the Middle East.
The word from Big Turk is that he will talk to Ryan Garcia to see where his head is at this week about the Devin Haney fight, and he will have an answer by next week if the rematch will happen next or if Ryan will have a tune-up. No word about a Romero rematch, which is what Ryan really needs, because who wants to see you box Devin if you can't make it past Rolly?
All the air got taken out of those tires, and you could almost get a sense of worry from Bill Haney's responses that he was uneasy being asked about that fight, but he knows that Devin needs it because outside of that fight, how else are you going to get a big bag? Especially as a welterweight, you can't boil down to 135 anymore, or 140. This is the biggest and simultaneously the most winnable fight for you at 147, but it's on the rocks.
At minimum, it's not a question that Bill has the answer to because he's not the one in charge. Turkey is. Turkey's the one that wanted to put it together, but does he still want to?
I wouldn't.
I, as a consumer, and whatever interest I had in that fight has all but dissipated. What Ryan needs to do is avenge the loss to Rolly, and what Devin needs to do is get out there and fight some welterweights, because you're not a super lightweight anymore.
Do it in such a way where people might actually want to see you fight, because in case you forgot, this is a business, not a sweepstakes.
It's not a bank heist. It's not all about making off like a bandit, which is what you're trying to do.